Well, I'm very, very excited to be joined by a colleague of mine, Bronwyn Paynter, who I first met doing some ANFT training, which is the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, a few years ago now. And of course, George Burns, who is clinical psychologist and adjunct professor of psychology. It's very exciting to be collaborating with both of you around this project we're doing in May, Nature as Co-Therapist, a Learning and Immersion. Yeah, I thought we'd get together today just to have a chat about, George, your kind of history and what brings you to nature-based therapy, and to share a little bit about what people can expect at the May event. So I'm going to hand it over to Bronwyn to kick off just with some questions. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Lucy. So I've just met George 5 minutes ago, and it's, I'm really excited to meet you, and I'm very excited about this collaborative opportunity. My word of the year is collaborate, and I just think it's really lovely to join together with like-minded people and share. So thank you. I am going to start by asking if you might start by introducing yourself and letting us know a little bit about your work.
Well, let me say I'm excited too. It's really good to be bringing in multi-disciplines, to be looking at a common theme that we have here, and a common theme that I think is very essential to our well-being and our survival as our species. So thank you, Bronwyn and Lucy, for creating the opportunity to have this happen. Well, a little bit in background, as Lucy said, I'm a clinical psychologist, adjunct professor of psychology. We tick off all the boxes. I've published 8 books that are out in, I've forgotten how many languages now, about 50 different articles. And one of the core themes through that has been about our contact with nature. That's been something there, I guess, from way back in my childhood, that I realised the value of just getting into nature if the proverbial hit the fan. And so I began to research it and began to look at it as a professional person, look at applying it. And as I said, it's become a very important part of my work, and one of the things that I love sharing most about my work. So again, thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, so in the last decade, it seems that ecotherapy's made a real resurgence, and practitioners from all walks of life are looking at ways of incorporating nature into their therapeutic practice. And it occurs to me that you were really at the forefront of this therapy long before the rest of us. You published Nature Guided Therapy in 1998. And I remember you telling me a while back, in those days, there was a lot more interest in your work overseas than there was here in Australia. So you were traveling out of the country regularly to teach others about your work. Can you speak a bit about what the landscape was like around this time? How receptive was the field of psychology to the concept of working with nature in therapy?
Oh, well, look, it wasn't. Mainstream psychology was very introspective. I mean, my own background in psychology, I was brought up and trained in very psychoanalytic, psychodynamic schools until I got into practice and basically found that it didn't work or didn't match for the clientele that I was working with. And it had me exploring other areas and looking at other things. But back in the 90s, when I wrote that book, there were things happening, and they were outside of the field of therapy and psychology. A lot of the original research came out of architecture, social geography, anthropology. These were the people that were looking at our connectedness with nature and the value of that to us as human beings. If I recall, I think it was about 1992, Rozak wrote his book, The Voice of the Earth, that was subtitled Eco-Psychology, and then Kleinbell came in about 96 and wrote about ecotherapy. These works weren't known to me at the time that I was beginning to write and put things together, but I found about it in my research. And so, yeah, you were considered very fringy if you started to talk about nature and its contact, it's not the sort of thing I would have written back to a referring GP and said, we're doing nature-guided therapy with this client. I might not have got more referrals. Yeah.
You reckon you would have got more referrals?
No, I know. Yeah. But again, I'll explain some more of that in the workshop and the origins of that for me.
Yeah. So how does your experience as a eco-psychologist back then compare to today? Are you noticing more interest in ecotherapy in Australia now?
Oh, look, without doubt, there is. I felt in some ways a bit of a lone voice in the wilderness, and it wasn't until I was talking with a colleague in America at a conference I was at, and I was writing about this area, and he said, "What are you doing?" And there was a Melbourne publisher interested, and he said to me, "Well, I'm having breakfast with my publisher tomorrow. Do you want to come along?" And I did, and the publisher was interested and said, "Well, we want this as a book." And so suddenly I had to write it. The interest wasn't there so much then. I mean, now there is a diverse range of interest of a lot of people, a lot of organisations starting to get interested too. And it's good to see this, because we're not just what goes on inside us. We're very interconnected with the world and all the systems around us.
Absolutely.
Can I ask where this started for you? What led you down this path, and also who might have been instrumental in making this journey for you into nature-guided therapy?
Oh, well, look, we were brought up as kids with contact with nature. My father built a treehouse for my sister and I, and as a child, I loved crawling up into it and watching the birds land in the branches and hearing their songs, and bugs crawl across the leaves and things like this. We had exposure to going to the beach. So there was that childhood influence that was there. And I guess it was knowing the value of that in my own life that I began to explore. Is this likely to be helpful for the people that I'm working with as well? I think in the field of influences from outside, the work of Milton Erickson, the American psychiatrist who was well known for his innovative approaches to therapy, he used nature. He lived in Phoenix in Arizona. I studied his work a lot. I went regularly to the conferences, presented at the conferences there. He would have people go out and climb a local mountain called Squaw Peak. He responded to someone once who said, "Well, if you're in the middle of New York, how do you use nature?" And he said, "Well, you get somebody to plant a window box for themselves and watch a flower grow, or go to Central Park and look at a squirrel climbing a tree." Erickson, because of his innovative approaches to therapy overall, but also his inclusion and incorporation of nature, was a very strong influence on my professional career and thinking.
You've been quoted, George, as saying that nature-guided therapy enables us to create effective, positive relational behaviours rather than just eliminate the undesired. This seems to reflect the intersection of positive psychology and nature-based work. Can you speak a bit more about the influence of positive psychology in your work?
Yes, well, I mentioned Milton Erickson. Milton Erickson, I think, was the archetype of positive psychology. He would ask the question, what's right with someone, rather than what's wrong with someone. He would look for resources, he'd look for strengths, he'd utilize those. He was a strong role model for me. And before the word positive psychology ever came into being, but it arose out of that whole school there now arose out of when Martin Seligman was president of the American Psychological Association. And for his year of presidency, he wanted to set a theme. So he had a think tank of colleagues, and they said just that: we've been looking at the problems for too long. let's look at what's good about people, what's helpful about people, what can enhance their well-being, what can enhance their happiness levels. And so this has developed a whole area of very interesting and good research. And for me, it ties very closely into what I'm working with nature, because nature's that same sort of experience. Contact with nature is about altering our experiences, about creating the opportunity for people to experience things differently from what they've been experiencing them, and know that change can happen. Nature is an experiential context for that, but it's also a great metaphor for it as well.
That's something else I love about your work too, is the use of metaphor. And so, you know, in nature, you can see something struggling, but you can also see hope. And I think that's sort of what you're paralleling here, is being able to work with nature in a way that shows strength. And we can see that in our environment too.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, indeed. Nature has that ability to overcome the biggest obstacles that, you know, are thrown at it at times. You walk through, as we've unfortunately had too many experiences of, a bushfire area, and just see nature regenerating, life coming back against all sorts of odds.
Life persisting.
Yeah.
We've created this Nature as Co-Therapist training and immersion experience in May as a collaboration between the three of us from different fields, different professions. So from psychology, Lucy from social work, myself from occupational therapy. What can people expect? And people will be coming from, you know, lots of different backgrounds and perspectives, we hope. What can people expect to learn from you, and what might therapists take away, whatever discipline they're from?
Look, I'll bring in some of the evidence base that there is, and I know that there's a good level of interest in that, but I don't want that to be an academic sort of presentation. The evidence is there. You know, contact with nature enhances our well-being physically, psychologically, socially, spiritually. Yeah, you know, it's a fact. We've got all the data that we need, literally thousands of studies and thousands of reviews of thousands of studies. So the evidence is there. I'll bring that in. I'll bring in some of the theory and background to it. But mostly I want to make, and as a clinician myself, the things that I find helpful are those hands-on tools that you can use and you can work with your clients. So I would like to step through in my workshop the beginning, from how you might make an assessment to work with nature-guided therapy, some of the tools within that area that can be applicable. I'd like to demonstrate this, and I'd like to bring in case examples of that, so that, as I said, we're making it a practical, hands-on experience. The information on the research, you know, we can all pick up a book and read it. But having that hands-on experience has been the value for me in going to workshops and going to conferences and looking at how colleagues work with techniques. And so that's what I would like to share, that very practical hands-on approach to the workshop.
And I think that's what is attracting people, is knowing that it's about translating that evidence into practice, and that, you know, we will be practicing and learning and experiencing and going away with, you know, actual hands-on skills to you know, to do this work in partnership with nature. So thank you.
And it's also worth mentioning the beautiful location which we're going to be. So, you know, some of this work is going to happen outside. We're going to be in nature practicing this, and having nature right beside us in a really lovely location. I'm really looking forward to just spending some time there, grounding and enjoying the bush.
It is beautiful.
Me too.
It's an area of heritage protected bush. It's my childhood Girl Guide camping ground. So yeah, there's lots of levels of connection, and I went back there for the first time in probably 30 years, and it was beautiful. So yeah, I think it's a perfect place for us.
Yeah.
So this question's a little bit left field. And you probably know, George, that one of my passions is around climate change and how that impacts on people. It's going to be one of the big issues going forward, if it's not already. So I imagine going forward, we'll see, more people presenting to us with eco-distress from both the direct effects of climate change through maybe their experience of disaster, as well as indirect effects. Feelings of despair and hopelessness and eco-anxiety about the future. So I just wondered, through your eyes, what do you see nature-guided therapy offering us in these unsettling times as we face the reality of global warming on our planet?
Yeah, well, it's a fact, it's there, but it's not the only fact either. I mean, we've got particularly in Australia, a very strong urbanisation with the majority of our population living in high density areas. We've got planning policies of infill. We've got reducing yards that people have, that the trees aren't in the backyard for kids to climb and explore anymore, or plant vegetables. There are a number of distancing things happening for us from nature. Our entertainment is canned, a lot of it, and so there are a lot of factors there that are distancing us from nature. I think working therapeutically, what we're doing is reconnecting people with nature. But nature-guided therapy and therapy that we use is primarily about therapy. It's about that client who comes into our office and says, I don't want to be feeling anxious anymore. I don't want to be feeling depressed anymore. I don't want to be in this violent relationship, or whatever that might be. And our goal as therapists is really to be working primarily with helping the person resolve those presenting issues that come to us, to work towards their goals. But I think there's a secondary spin-off of using nature too. And that is, there's a lot of fear around global warming and climate change. We don't necessarily bring about change or readily on a basis of fear. And that's out there, we're getting it very strongly. People will protect what they love. And if we're helping people connect with nature, and people are seeing the benefits of that, not only for them, but the intrinsic value in nature itself, then there's a love. And that will be, I think, the basis of what will bring about change. At least I hope so.
I absolutely agree with you. And that's one of my passions in this work, is to reconnect people with nature, because if we love nature more, we're going to want to care for it, and that means we'll take action to care for this planet, this one and only planet we have. So that's kind of what drives me in this work, and I'm glad you share that as well. It's really nice to hear.
Yeah, it is good to know that. And I think as we come together in May, we'll find lots of common interests on some of these themes with all of the people that join in with us. And I'm really keenly looking forward to, what you guys present too.
Thank you. I'm going to ask about your relationship with nature. Tell us about where you feel most connected.
I walked across the road this morning. I plunged into the ocean. I had a swim. I took a walk along the beach. Other people are walking along the beach. They smile. They say good morning. It's damn hard to be depressed when that's happening. And for me, I used to live in the hills here in Perth. I love trees. I made a sea change a few years ago. I love getting on my kayak, paddling out with dolphin and sea lions and swimming with them. For me, and seeing the bird life that comes in, the migratory birds, like my beloved bridal terns that travel 10,000 kilometres, and the buzz I get when they arrive back to nest each season. I love the forests in the southwest of Western Australia, the kauri and the tinglewoods, it's the tallest trees in the world. It's for me, it's like stepping into a living cathedral when I go there. And I've described it before as my soul country. I feel that, but also I over last 13, 15 years, I've been doing volunteer work in the Himalayas in the Kingdom of Bhutan. And that also feels like home to me. We've got a government that's declared that 60% of its forests will remain virgin forests forever. It's teeming with wildlife. It's beautiful vegetation as you go up and down mountains. It's changing before your eyes. Snow-capped peaks there. For me, that's a place of real connectedness with our world as well.
There's so many layers of meaning in all of that, and that's the connection of what is home, what is place, and it can be many things.
Yeah.
I love your looking out for the birds, the migratory birds returning, and that connection with the rhythms and cycles and predictability of nature. Thank you. So I think you've already touched on this a little, but what has it meant for you to have that connection with nature, and how has that influenced your work? I mean, it sounds to me like that is everything. And I do recall reading in your book about just that concept that as practitioners, often we have our own kind of, well-being practices, if you want to call it that. And, reading about your sort of thinking of how do we use those with our clients. So yeah, how had your connection with nature, come to influence your work?
Yeah, well, I think in some of the ways that we have spoken, Bronwyn, and what it is that the basis for me is there. I know that, and I hear that from other people. You connect with nature, and again, as I use the example, the proverbials hit the fan, and you go for a walk along the beach, and suddenly a dolphin fin props up. Things change.
Yeah.
Your experience changes, your attention changes, and what we put our attention on is what we amplify and what's important for us. So I guess that shift in attention, when we start to notice those things outside of ourselves and not just having that inner perspective, and that's been there for me, and I guess it's led me into the work of saying, well, how can we make use of this? What are some of the strategies? What are some of the skills? What are some of the techniques that might be useful to help people make that connection in a way that's meaningful for them, and to gain from them the sort of resources they're needing to deal with the things that they're facing at this point in time.
Thank you. I know that many of the people who are coming to this experience, and many of the people that I work with also have this innate knowing of the benefits of being in nature ourselves. And I'm really hoping that what this event and connection brings to people is just that confidence to really intentionally partner with nature in their work, because it can be so simple, and so much of it is about, I think sometimes getting away from worrying about the evidence too much and actually looking at what can we actually do on the ground.
Yeah, agree with you indeed.
Yeah, thank you.
And having your own connection, I think that's what brings us to this work, is because we have experienced kind of the healing benefits. As someone who's hurt their back and spent sort of 2 years just regularly walking through some trees, because that was the only exercise, no physio could fix me. I know what it's like to just slow down, walk, and just feel the presence of those trees every day. And so having your own experience of healing certainly helps. And sometimes I share that with people because they're a little bit skeptical sometimes. And I know a lot of people are practicing mindfulness as well, and I just love partnering with nature to teach mindfulness. I'm not the teacher. Nature actually does the work, and when we just tune into those sounds and smells and textures and tastes, they get it. Like nature does the work. They get the mindfulness practice where they've often struggled before. Because someone's just told them what to do, and nature has the messages of how to do it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. But I just wanted
I think we'll both be doing all of us doing some exercises around those things to demonstrate that too, which again is another exciting level for me.
I do think that's what shifts us, is feeling it. feeling it and then truly knowing it.
Yeah.
Mm.
I just wanted to finish, because I know your time is very precious, George, but on another kind of practice, which is something that I really, value in my life, and that's gratitude.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, what are you grateful for right now?
I'm grateful for being alive. I'm grateful to be able to look out and see the ocean. I'm grateful for love. I'm grateful for family. I'm grateful for friends. I'm grateful that I'm here in this exciting time in life. I'm grateful that I watch a sunset from the West Coast every day, and just experience the joy of that. I think it was Carl Rogers who said at one stage that, we watch a sunset every night because it's different, but we expect our relationships to be the same all the time. And I think, there are lessons in just watching sunsets and having those experiences that you can be grateful for. Gratitude is a core ingredient to our happiness and well-being. And, again, something from positive psychology that we spoke about before, the research evidence on that one is very clear and strong.
Well, thank you. I'm really grateful that we're able to come together tonight and speak about our hopes for the event that we've got coming up in May. So thanks so much for making the time, George, and Bronwyn, coming on and sharing in this conversation too.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. And if not before, we'll see you in May.
Fabulous.
Okay. Take care.